Somewhere in the red clay hills of central Georgia, a plantation record sits filed away in a county courthouse archive. Water, stained and barely legible. It contains a single sentence no historian has ever fully explained. No white man has crossed the line of the Rue cabin since the incident of late summer 1857, and none shall be compelled to do so. 4 masters. 4 men who owned human beings, who broke families apart with the same ease others broke bread. 4 of them refused, collectively and in writing, to approach one small cabin at the edge of a cotton field. That cabin belonged to a woman named Cora Rue, and what she planted around it over 18 months changed something fundamental on that land. Her story has never been told in full. Until now, the Harlan Plantation sat 11 miles southeast of Milledgeville, Georgia. Then the state capital, a city of political ambition and old Southern pride. By the mid-1850s, the region was defined almost entirely by short, staple cotton. The summers were brutal temperatures in the upper 90s for weeks. Humidity like a wet wool blanket, the red soil cracking and bleeding rust. Colored water after even the lightest rain. The plantation belonged to Clement Harlan, 43 years old, precise, cautious, deeply attached to order. He was not theatrically cruel. He kept meticulous records, measured productivity in cold units, and administered consequences with the efficiency of an accountant. By 1857, he held 41 enslaved people, their names recorded in his ledgers like livestock: first name, age, task, condition. Cora Rue was listed as Cora, approximately 38, field and household, condition sound. That notation, sound, said nothing about who she really was. Nothing about the 2 children she had lost, one to fever, one to a sail that took a boy named Solomon to the Carolinas. Nothing about the years she spent learning every plant in the red clay, what each could do, what each meant, how to make things grow where they were not welcome. 3 other planters would appear in that courthouse. Document, Randolph Sutter. A short, tempered neighbor to the east, Wesley Prout, a younger man who had inherited his land and never shed the unease of unearned wealth. And Marcus Delavan, the most educated, who carried his learning like a shield. The cabin at the eastern boundary had been a storage building. Clement assigned it to Cora in spring 1856. Logistical reasons, reduced travel time. It was smaller than the others, more isolated, closer to the mosquito-ridden low ground. Most considered it undesirable. Cora accepted without visible reaction and moved in alone. No one paid attention to what she did with the ground around it. Not at first. The change began slowly, as a feeling. By midsummer, field workers noticed a smell when the wind came from that direction, green, sharp, faintly bitter, with an undertone like burnt earth after lightning or the inside of a church. By autumn, plants had formed a dense ring around the cabin's sassafras, pennyroyal, black cohosh, crow's foot, and rose of a dark, leafed plant with small white flowers that bloomed only at dusk. She also grew wild tobacco, low, dense, its leaves broader and darker than commercial strains. Theodora Prout, the neighbor's wife, who prided herself on knowing plants, stopped her carriage one afternoon. She stared at the garden with something between fascination and revulsion. That evening, she sent Clement a note. Some of what I saw I could not name. Some of what I could name I would rather not put to paper. Clement walked to the eastern boundary the next morning. He recorded the visit in his ledger. Found extensive and unusual cultivation. Asked Cora about the plants. She was cooperative. She grows what is useful for cooking and medicine. She cannot be faulted directly. I will observe further. He observed further. And what he saw made him increasingly reluctant to observe at all. To understand what Cora built, you must understand the knowledge she carried. She had grown up on a plantation in Putnam County, where an elderly woman named Mama Thistle taught her the work a living system of botanical knowledge, rooted in West African traditions, adapted to American soil, hidden from the men who owned the practitioners. When Cora was sold to Harland in 1834, she carried that knowledge with her. For 20 years, she watched, learned, and waited. She helped women through labors, eased children's fevers, treated wounds. She was not feared. She was trusted. The garden was not a weapon. It was a boundary. It communicated something the era's laws made impossible to state directly. By spring 1857, word had spread among the enslaved population of all 4 plantations. Women came to Cora for help. They left with dried herbs, instructions, and something harder to measure. A changed expression, a different bearing, as though they had remembered something. Then came the summer of 1857, the driest in a decade. Creeks dropped. Cotton curled. Sutter lost a field to blight. Proutswell went brackish. Delavan hauled water by wagon. But on Harland's eastern fields, the ones bordering Cora's cabin, the cotton was the healthiest on the property. The soil felt cooler, more yielding. The difference was too consistent to explain rationally. A field hand, named Tobias Edo, reported to Clement that on new moon nights, Cora walked her garden perimeter after midnight, speaking quietly, then knelt among the plants. Clement returned to the boundary with Wesley Prout. Both men stood at the edge, unwilling to step inside. Prout later wrote that the garden was denser than expected, arranged in a pattern that was no accident. He felt an unwillingness to enter that he could not explain. Cora sat outside her door watching them. Her expression was described as quiet, a word that frightened them because it implied a place they could not access. Clement asked Cora to explain. She did, reasonably, cooperatively. She named the plants, described medicinal uses, spoke of treating the other workers. Clement could find no grounds to object. The garden was not interfering with work. It was not on needed land. It was improving the cotton. There was nothing he could point to. But by August, the 4 planters were afraid. Not of anything they could name. But the fear was there in how they spoke about the eastern boundary. Sutter wrote to his brother, "Harland has a problem he does not know how to name. The woman at the eastern cabin has made something there. It has an audience among the other people that Harland has entirely failed to appreciate." Say women from neighboring properties kept coming. Seeds and information spread. Then 3 things happened in 4 days. First, a woman named Hetty planted herbs along the Sutter cabin wall. When ordered to pull them up, they reappeared in 2 harder to find locations. Second, Prout discovered women meeting before dawn near his tree line. Just talking, but when questioned, each gave a different, mundane answer. Third, Delavan found a dried sprig pressed into his study window frame. A physician friend identified it as a West African marker plant. The message, he said, was something like I know where you live. The 4 men met in Clement's study. They agreed. None would go to the eastern boundary cabin. Not to confront, not to investigate, not for any purpose that required them to enter Cora's space. They filed a document stating that the cabin was outside reasonable expectation for productive oversight, and that no party would be compelled to approach it. In legal language, they acknowledged a boundary they did not control. They signed their names to a document that said, "We will not go near it." Why were they afraid? 3 layers. First, practical. Cora had real medical knowledge that gave her authority and trust across a network no overseer could map. Second, botanical signaling. Her garden was a form of communication they could feel but not rid, deeply threatening to men whose position depended on defining reality. Third, the mirror. Her garden was evidence that their system was not total, not absolute. It had a border, and one woman had found it and was standing there. Clement wrote in his ledger, The matter is considered closed for purposes of this record. But the matter had merely become too large for the ledger. The years that followed brought no tidy resolution. Sutter died of a stroke in 1860. Prout sold his land in 1861 and moved north. Delavan failed. His property was auctioned in 1866. Clement survived the war but lost the plantation system. He died in reduced circumstances in 1871. His ledgers sit today in an archive, meticulous and cold. What happened to Cora after emancipation is not recorded. She was approximately 42 in 1863. Where she went, whether she found Solomon, these things are not known. But the garden was still there in 1866. A Union survey team noted unusual botanical cultivation on the eastern boundary. The surveyor marked it on his map with "See note." No note was ever found. The courthouse document sat for decades, misfiled as a minor boundary dispute. It was only later that a researcher understood what it really was. The record of 4 powerful men refusing to cross a line drawn by one woman with nothing but plants, patience, and knowledge. What did Cora intend? She left no written record. But the effects speak. She built something that 4 men with all the power of that era at their backs refused to enter. She drew a line, and the line held. History does not always announce itself. Sometimes it presses between the boards of a courthouse wall and waits. Sometimes it grows back in 2 different locations. The soil holds it. The soil remembers.